My question is very specific and very pointed into a particular issue we have around neighbourhood planning. And Brandon, thank you for your letter this morning on this particular issue. Where we have a neighbourhood plan, Richard Stowe from Central Bedfordshire, we're a newish unitary authority. We have a local neighbourhood plan which is across 2 parishes. We have a particular issue at the moment with PIMS, with the Planning Inspectorate, on our local plan in Bedfordshire. Where we don't have a local plan in place, and this accounts for large swathes of southern England which are in green belt, we cannot deliver a neighbourhood plan. We've been working on this for 3.5 years. We can't, under current rules, it would appear, take our neighbourhood plan to referendum, because we are quite rightly, for all the right reasons, proposing minor changes to Greenbelt to deliver the right houses for local people with local support. We can't do that unless there is a local plan in place. And the Planning Inspectorate aren't being desperately helpful at the moment in helping us get to that point. So a very, very specific question around how do we get to a point of delivery of the neighbourhood plan.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Now, I'm not going to suggest we go up and down the thing. You can chip in if you want to. And I'm also going to try and avoid all the questions being answered by the Minister, if we can avoid that. But I don't know whether, Brandon, if you wanted to start off answering that.
So you have to excuse me if I'm sort of looking. Can we just flick that off? I think Nick's probably got the same issue. But I'm looking straight down the eye of the light bulb. I can't talk to a particular specific planning issue because of the creation of the judicial process. I'm glad you found the note helpful. I mean, obviously a neighbourhood plan can go ahead of a local plan and can be in place ahead of a local plan. The challenge you've got is if you are looking at Greenbelt is exceptional circumstances. It has to be robustly and properly reviewed, and that's something that's done by the district council, the local council, the unitary authority, depending on where you are, as part of a full review of the Greenbelt. Now that has to be there because, as I say, we think Greenbelt should only be done in exceptional circumstances. But I'll happily have a chat with you separately about where you are with what the direct impact is. But you'll excuse me, I can't comment on a particular local plan. But as a general rule, yeah, Greenbelt we are always going to be quite restrictive about, in the sense it's got to be done as part of a full and robust review. And the issue about robustness I'll touch on generally when I close in a few minutes.
Are there any other comments people feel moved? Don't worry, I'm not going to pick on anybody, if you want to say anything. Let's go to the second question, which I think was over there, and then I'm going to come over there. So, would you like to say who you are?
I'm Freddie Jick, I'm Chairman of Civic Voice. I wanted to pick up on some of the comments made by Oliver Letwin about social capital, because actually what we're all involved in is community engagement and building social capital. So in a way, the neighbourhood plans, developing neighbourhood plans, is leading the way on promoting some of this community engagement, but also the community rights that Stephen Williams talked about. Thousands of people, again, are very much involved in community engagement. I would argue that that should be extended into the design and review of the delivery of public services. Coming back to planning, the Civic Voice and the Civic Society movement has issued a manifesto in which one of the main asks is that all planning processes, not simply the preparation of local plans and neighbourhood plans, but also specific development plans, should involve much greater community involvement, using something like the charrette process that's been employed quite a lot in North America, in Scotland, and increasingly in the UK. I'd be interested in the views of the panel as to whether that could be made a mandatory part of the planning process, or if there's some other way of encouraging it to be used more widely.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I might suggest that Phil and then perhaps Nick Herbert might comment on that. I said I wouldn't pick on you, then I just have.
No, I'd love to comment. That's fine. Thank you very much. I suppose a couple of comments. I think there's a danger if we start to have a formulaic approach to neighbourhood planning. So no, I wouldn't be in favour of what you're suggesting. I would just very quickly also issue a slight word of warning in all of this. We've talked about the use of external consultants. We've seen that. Actually, if you heard from the panel and talking to them, I think their success has been they've done it themselves in the vast majority of cases. As we externalise this and seek to bring in perhaps other formulas, perhaps external consultants, there is a danger that you start losing some of that social cohesion and social capital that comes from literally a community bringing themselves together and doing it for themselves, rather than simply saying, we want something, let's bring someone in to do it for us. Sorry, I went off a slight tangent. The simple answer to your question is no, I wouldn't take a formulaic approach to these things.
Nick, did you have a comment?
No.
No? Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question. It's the gentleman here in the second row back.
With 2 microphones, which is great. Clive Fane, Central Milton Keynes Business Neighbourhood Plan. The question I really wanted to do was just to ask all the panel the question on the Terry Farrell raised, which is one of scale. At Milton Keynes, would you believe it, we have our referendum, twin referendum, on election day, the 7th of May. So when you get bored with national elections and general election, have a look for the Business Neighbourhood Plan. But it's a serious question of scale, because what we found going through the CMK BMP is we are such a huge conurbation that our problem has been to grasp that problem of scale. And I just really wanted the panel's view on this question of scale, because I thought Terry brought it out very well, but it is this question of success of neighbourhood planning, I think is undoubted, is a tremendous success story, but when you increase that size, you bring serious problems of indigestion. Just wondered what the panel across the board felt on that.
Well, perhaps if I can ask for some views. But Terry, do you want to start? Since you raised the issue.
I'd be interested in the other panelists' comments on it. Well, I mentioned earlier on that the scale is an issue, and also it's not just neighbourhoods. People in neighbourhoods go to hospitals, which are vast and a real problem of design and planning, and they go to universities, they go to shopping centres, and they go to their local high streets. Oxford Street in London is an unresolved issue. How do you solve those kind of issues through the neighbourhood planning, learning from neighbourhood planning? Because I think there are a lot of good lessons here. I think the ability to learn about your place, its history, and to engage with communities is a very, very positive thing that we should try and think now about how we scale it up.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question, but I think I'd just like to reflect on another issue of scalability, which is around much more at a local level. And I've been quite impressed going around the country discovering so many parishes agreeing to work together on local neighbourhood plans across parish boundaries and indeed across district and county areas. And I think that reflects what's going on the ground. And that's often difficult. Parishes don't always agree with each other, but they are coming together in neighbourhood planning, which again is another strength.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just to put some context to it, I think in our experience, we've seen it working well in places like Knaresborough, Saltash, Tame, Keyworth in Rushcliffe. Maximum population size around the town is probably 10, 11,000 people. And smaller than that, I think it's workable. Beyond that, I think our experience hasn't really sort of seen it achieve a great deal.
Okay, let's have a couple more questions. There's a gentleman here and there's a lady over there.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
My name's Tim Taylor. I sit on Neighbourhood Forum, and in my spare time I'm a planning lawyer. The question really is one of delay, and as we mentioned a few times about how long these things can take, and also the point that you made about planning by appeal coming through. And it just seems to me when the legislation came out, it was pretty clear that the objective was to try and empower local communities, but actually the real power lay with local authorities who could sit on applications for designation of neighbourhood forums or assets community value applications, etc. And it just seems to me now that having heard everything today, which has been really positive and empowering, now maybe it's the time to legislate and to put in something like a deemed consent if an application isn't granted, because no impoverished local community is going to unfortunately instruct me to judicially review a decision not to make a designation of neighbourhood or equivalent. Just wondered if Brandon and Nick had any thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. I will go to the Minister first.
Yeah, no, I'll do that very straight up, actually. You'll probably be, hopefully, therefore, pleased to know that we have actually responded to that consultation. One of the things we will be doing is making it very clear local authorities have a set time frame in which to designate an area. If not, there will be a presumption that it is designated. Certainly if it's a parished area, there's no good reason anyway for it to take any time at all. It's straightforward and simple, and as we've seen, the vast majority are being done on those kind of boundaries. So that will speed things up. One of the other things I'm looking at is we've got to get a balance. This is something I do want to just touch on, particularly bear in mind some of the comments Nick made, which I have a lot of sympathy with. We've got to get a balance around, we want this to be as simple and as quick as possible, but if it's going to have weight in planning law, it's got to be robust, and there is a balance to be found there. Now, in terms of the initial designation, that should be quick and straightforward. There's no reason that should take very long. Equally, at the other end, I'm very sympathetic to the arguments around we should not be allowing local authorities to delay referenda beyond a reasonable period, i.e. the next set of local elections or within 12 months if they're up in every 4 years. And that's what I'm quite interested in doing. And I will be talking further in due course about how we can go further in terms of speeding up the process, simplifying it. I think what we've done over the last few months in terms of the designation, in terms of some of the templates and the advice that's out there and what people can see will help. But I'm not against going further. We want these to be easy, quick, and therefore to grow exponentially.
Okay, I'm going to try and get a few more questions in, and it'll help if the questions are short. So 2 or 3 questions, perhaps. Let's start with the lady over here.
Hi, Jenny Osborne from TPAS. Stephen talked before about the need to widen neighbourhood plans being wider than just more affluent areas. So I was interested to see what the panel thought about the ways that we can get more social housing tenants involved in neighbourhood plans, but also what do you think are the barriers for them getting involved?
Okay.
I'll chip in initially and I'll hand over to anybody else. There shouldn't be any barriers. I mean, I think it's a really good thing for more people to get involved. And I was absolutely enthralled when I went over to Southwark to see what they're looking at doing in Southwark, around neighbourhood planning there and getting that forum going, which is going to include exactly that. And I think that's a really good example of where this can work in anywhere. So people keep talking to me about, and I keep visiting some lovely rural areas, looking at lovely rural neighbourhood plans. It is just as applicable to a very densely populated urban area. And I think the more we can encourage that through the town councils, which is one of the easiest ways to do it, but also through the local authorities, the better. And as I think Broadland, to be fair, I'm not just saying this because they're a neighbouring authority to my own county, but a really good example of how you can get areas going. And they had a workshop recently actually at Carrow Road in Norwich to get more areas to see what they can do, to just make people more aware of how you can do this regardless of where you are.
Any comments from the panel?
Only just to say we mustn't forget rural poverty in all this. All these rural areas are not actually chocolate box. The reality is very different, and many parishes are engaging with hard-to-reach groups and vulnerable groups to make sure neighbourhood plans meet their needs too.
Excellent. Now, you can see this way it's working. Already the empowerment's going, so someone's already got a mic, so it's over there. So if we want to answer the next question whilst this one's going, then we'll try and get the mic to you then at next speed. So, Tony.
Thank you, Steve. Tony Burton, neighbourhood planner. Really welcome the panel's response to the challenge of the 20,000 odd communities who aren't neighbourhood planning yet and have probably never heard of it, and the dozens of local authorities who are either scared of neighbourhood planning or positively obstructing it in their areas.
Any takers on that? Jonathan?
Roll out parishes across England would be my plea.
Well, I'll take that as a comment rather than a question. I think I saw someone at the back. Is it the mic? And then we go to the lady right at the back.
Hi, it's Philip Barnes, Group Land and Planning Director for Barratt Developments. Like John Kenny at CEG, we've fully embraced neighbourhood planning and getting involved in that process. And it was great to hear Ron Simpson's describing his experience in Uppingham. Sometimes, though, we find, and I wouldn't by no means every time, sometimes we sense a reticence from the neighbourhood plan group to embrace the developers and speak to the developers. And I'm just wondering if the panel had a similar experience and whether there was merit in perhaps beefing up the guidance to make sure that it should be an inclusive process, embracing all members of the community.
Well, again, perhaps Phil, from your experience in community engagement, do you feel that there's a reticence?
I'm in slightly dangerous territory because we're clearly working with Barratt Homes on a very large site close to us, so I need to be very careful. I think that there is probably still a danger, and I referred to it in what I was saying, that communities still feel like things are being done to them, and we need to see communities as an equal partner. And I know you're very sympathetic to that, Philip. And I think it's working with them and seeing them as a main player and optimising what we can do with them. I think it's very dangerous if we start to legislate to require that sort of equality. And I think it's much more about changing culture for all of us, that we can see each other as much more equal partners as parish and town councils are more and more empowered. I would just also say, and I haven't said it yet, I think parish and town councils, many of them have to really step up to the plate in this. And when they are going to be getting significant millions of pounds of money, they need to really also embrace and engage in a way that perhaps they haven't done before.
Nick, I think you indicated you were going to speak.
Yeah, I do think one of the things that makes parish councils nervous of the engagement with developers is because of the controversy around previous planning applications in their areas, and indeed ongoing potential speculative applications, which are then very difficult for them to deal with. So I think closing off that particular, what I regard as a loophole, actually, would help considerably. And in the end, I think what Oliver Letwin said was powerful about the way in which neighbourhood planning has genuinely delivered a plan-led system at the very local level. That's what we want to achieve, something that is genuinely plan-led rather than developer-led. And that is actually also about the attitude that developers take to this process. So, frankly, it's a free country and developers will see their opportunities. But if they are piling in and very often trying to take advantage of making a speculative application at the same time as a parish council is trying to draw up its neighbourhood plan and doesn't want development in that area, they can hardly be surprised, frankly, if the parish council finds it then very difficult to engage. So I think that is why I think this is important to try and go back to the original premise, which is that it should be a plan-led approach.
I'm going to briefly abuse my position as chair and thing and say that guidance is really important and has a role. But actually, this summit is part of the spreading of the message, of the sharing of success and showing that actually can happen. And that message is really what makes people engage. And you've heard from the case studies, when people take the power, do it, then they really can see the benefits of it. I'm going to come to the final question, which is the lady right at the back.
Oh, that's pressure, isn't it? Julie Grohl from British Bids, and I've been fascinated to hear the kind of experiences around the country of stakeholder engagement and partnership development, much of what business improvements are about too. British Bids is a national organisation for business improvement districts, and I kind of had two questions really, a question and a comment perhaps. I'm interested to hear from the panel members what they believe the necessary integration and relationship should be between neighbourhood forums and business improvement districts, but actually, importantly, we push very hard in the early stages to ensure communities were seen as businesses, not just residents. They must be inclusive communities. And so how do we bring that together? And the kind of just supplementary was picking up on something Phil said, and apologies if I'm taking it the wrong way around, but that's absolutely at odds with our world in bids a decade on now to suggest there's no formulaic approach here. We are ensuring there's a very, very strong, robust formulaic approach to bids, because a decade on, they are being shot at by everyone, and we need to ensure quality and integrity is in the organisations. Now, maybe that's because we're funded by a mandatory levy of businesses, but I'm interested in that kind of dichotomy between our world and your world, which seems very different.
Okay, thank you for that question. As the last question, before we have closing remarks, I'm going to start at the far end and ask all the panellists to make a quick comment on that question. So.
Thank you. I think the key point there, in my view, is that it's about collaboration, and we've heard earlier on about alignment and making sure that all sort of aspects of the community, business, housing, and sort of local sort of residents and community groups are involved. And I think that through neighbourhood planning, there's a key sort of message about aligning interests, where everybody is essentially empowered to achieve a given set of objectives. I think, as I tried to sort of point out in my presentation, that I believe those objectives need to be made clear if people are going to be able to sort of take the responsibility for discharging those objectives later on.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Well, just to add the word partnerships, I suppose, to collaboration is part of the same theme. And the other thing I would just like to leave people with is just making sure that expectations aren't unreasonably raised, really, and that those partnerships and collaborations have to deliver for the people.
Bill, a bit of a challenge there.
Yeah, just in response, I may have misunderstood the question that was put to me. My understanding was, should we be effectively using charrettes every time we do a neighbourhood plan or something similar to that? My response is, I don't think we should tell people how they do a neighbourhood plan. They should choose themselves.
Nigel?
Victoria is a key example of bids working with the residents. It was made a business area because 80% of the floor area is for business, 20% for residents. But the residents had a long track record of negotiating with developers over the ongoing development in Victoria. If you're going back that way tonight, you'll notice it. So for the Victoria bid anyway, it was key to engage with the residents, and early days, but I'm hopeful.
Okay, briefly, Terry?
Well, I think it would be wrong to see the success we have had as being just a means of meeting the housing crisis. We have a planning crisis. We don't proactively plan. Development control is just not an adequate way to plan our future, but there are certainly seeds in this process of neighbourhood planning that we should build on. But let's not kid ourselves. It's just a drop in the ocean compared with how we plan our cities, towns, villages in a comprehensive way, including bids, including Milton Keynes example.
And perhaps finally, before we move to the Minister's closing remarks, Nick?
No, I'd like to give the Minister more time.
Okay. in that case, then, I'll thank all the speakers and perhaps a appreciation